we have to be willing to ask the hard, painful, challenging question. This seems a little odd. Like why would you settle down with all of these men? You passed up great men, but you settled down to be with men that were damn near on death's bed in different moments of their life. And why did you do that, Renee? And then I realized because my little girl was still the one picking.
Welcome to the Upfront Podcast, where healing meets real talk on Black love. We're diving into why so many driven, self-aware singles are still searching for the one. From dating apps to deep therapy, emotional blocks to generational wisdom, we're bringing it all up front. You'll hear from psychologists, married couples, divorcees, influencers, all with no filters. If you're ready to heal first so you can love forever, this is your space. Let's get up front. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Upfront Podcast. I am your host, John Graham, founder and CEO of Upfront Marital Technologies Incorporated, otherwise known as Upfront to y'all. And I'm excited. Today. I have not only a real one, an authority in her space, doing phenomenal work for community in the area of love and relationship and healing in a very unique way. I have Renee Miller, MBA, PCC, and all types of acronyms that we'll get into, but I just want to introduce y'all to her. So I'm going to do the embarrassing thing of reading her bio, which I know everybody who has a bio loves hearing their bio read to them. It's actually one of the highlights of our days. But Renee is the founder and chief certified love coach of the Love Camp, a transformative coaching and retreat organization dedicated to healing and restoring Black love. With over 15 years of experience, Renee specializes in guiding Black women to rediscover their authentic selves, embrace their divine femininity, and manifest the love they deserve. She's also the CEO of Remember Who You Are Enterprises Incorporated and the author of Seasons of Love, Love's Journey, 90 Days to Positive Change and Growth Journal. I am honored to have Sister Renee Miller. Welcome to the show. How are
Thank
you in this moment, sis?
you. I'm fabulous to be here. I like her. I want to hear that
Listen,
bio again. She sound like she
look,
cool people.
you should take me with you everywhere you go, and I'll just read that for everybody as your intro. But now we need theme music. What's your theme music, Renee? When you walk in there,
Dun-it, dun-it, dun-it. Like, you know
let's
how you
go.
feel like you already make some change, you already say some things? Dun-it. It's in my head. Just make it up.
Let's go. It's whatever beat you are drumming to today
Yep,
is your theme
indeed.
music. Well, look, I'm excited to get into it. This work of Love Camp, and I want to start there because I think when we were introduced by a dear mutual friend and sister, Kim Poole,
Yes, indeed.
who gallivants across the globe trying to bring the diaspora back to
Indeed.
restoration. She said it is a no-brainer for you and Renee to connect, and so I'm grateful that we did. But talk to me about the Love Camp. So, what was the inspiration, and what is the impact that you're making through Love Camp?
So let's just say Kim Poole was an intricate part of the Love Camp. I mean, I was with her when the Love Camp was born. And just quick story, I went on a investment tour to the continent. Second time in the continent. And we were over there in Tanzania, and we were just talking about how much the Black community needs healthier, happier love, more specific, the enormous amount of single Black women without these one parent households, without mates in their lives, and how we normalized, Black women normalized, not wanting, not, I wouldn't say not wanting, but not having the energy or even the effort to seek love, but really wanting it. And so that conversation was deep. It was painful. It was real. It was eye opening. And Kim gave me a challenge. She was like, listen, you've been coaching, you've been doing stuff in this space for 20 years, whether it's matchmaking or giving live events or going to churches or whatever it is. What are you going to do about it? And she's like, I'll partner with you. Let's do something. And originally, the idea was let's take some sisters to the continent and connect them with some brothers over there if they're having trouble with our men over here. And I was like, that's innovative. I'm not opposed to it, but I really want to start with more of our families here. So the Love Camp has evolved over the last 3 years, but the initial intent was how do we help more of our women get more healthy love? But then I was like, I'm not leaving my brothers behind.
Mm.
We have to see each other again, learn to value and honor each other. Too much divisiveness between us. And so that, and less than a year later, we went back to the continent via Kim's company, Thai Tours, and we had the first Love Camp International Retreat that people still talk about because we talked about what is love. Like we started with some foundational things, like what is love to you? And what's your context about love? And how do you use love as a practical, not just this theoretical Hollywood good feeling, but how do you use it as love in action? And we did the work for 10 days in Tanzania, and thus the Love Camp was born.
Mm.
Yeah.
Listen,
Powerful.
that is, I was about to say, that is transformative. I mean,
Thank you.
to bring that concept to people who are seeking it, right, first and foremost, but then to take them out of their comfort zone geographically, environmentally, and put them on a continent, right? So I'm sure for some of those guests, this was their first time on
Yep.
soil too.
Yep. Fish out of
So
water.
listen, so to have that kind of transformative moment with people who you are, doing life with or
Yep.
seeking to, right, to improve life with, is a brilliant idea. And I think,
Thank you.
I can imagine these people are forever changed.
Yeah. And they say that. One of the things that I thought for me was powerful was the way we write our curriculum is giving them the season, the symbolic season, with the actual excursions and activities we're doing. So it's not just a theoretical thing, it's now an experiential thing. So every time you think about you being in symbolic winter, you're thinking about how you hiked up Mount Kilimanjaro and you literally were putting down things that no longer served you. Now you have
Mm.
a memory, a vision, and an actual hands on experience because we want stuff to stick. We don't want it to be just a nice, feel good experience, but it's not sticking. And so everything that we do was so intentionally aligned with the season, with the topic, and with the goal that we had in mind for our folks to better equate themselves with love, with themselves, and significant others and people in general that look like them.
Powerful, powerful. What would draw somebody, like, who is your ideal love camper?
Ooh, love camper. I like that.
Yeah. take that,
So,
take that.
you know,
Use
I'll
that
receive it. I
gratuitously.
receive it. I receive it. I give you credit, but I receive
Yes,
it.
man. No, indeed, indeed.
I would say I've learned over time, because initially I would say every Black person, but we know that's not realistic. So, what I would say is someone who has not given up on love, someone who understands that there may be some pain, some frustration, some confusion, some disappointment, but understands even just a little bit that they're worth it, their family is worth it, their relationship is worth it, and ultimately their community. Because we're not seeking just to have a feel good. We want our communities to understand that love is a normal, worthy birthright. And the more we normalize it with each other, the more we can function healthier, happier, wholer. So people that have just an inkling of desire to keep love at the forefront of our lives, is who we're seeking. People that want to learn the skills.
Absolutely. And our audience for Upfront is in tune with that, right? In rhythm. These
I
are the
love
folks who are seeking to improve self for the betterment of a long-term, healthy, and sustainable relationship,
I love
which
that.
is why I love Love Camp. Um,
Thank
and for
you.
our executive members, just know Love Camp will be an available option for you
Whoop,
as far
whoop.
as singles retreat and learning how to love
Well, can I
abroad.
say something about that though?
Of course you may.
I love what you guys are doing up front. I've already started sharing it. Me and my love it. We're like, yes, let's
Thank you.
go.
Thank
We
you.
need what you guys are offering. We need that intentionality. We need
Yeah.
that process that people need to understand. We need that healing before we jump into the love space. So I love what you guys are doing.
Thank you for that. And I received that too.
You're welcome.
So look, I want to talk about Black professionals right now because they are struggling out here in these dating streets. Uh, and one of the topics that we were discussing offline was this concept of love blockages, and I wanted you to unpack that for those who are listening and watching. What is or what are love blockages, and why should people be aware of them?
So let me say this. If you've not done the work from childhood on up to adulthood to deal with things like trauma and things that really impact you, you have a love blockage. And damn near
Mm,
all of us have them until we do the healing work. And what I've learned is that there are 6 love blockages that we share to help people get over them and to heal. And before I tell you what they are, I'm going to tell you essentially a love blockage is anything that gets in the way of you having the highest experience with love that you can have. Not just, oh, I got somebody in my life, we see each other occasionally, or oh, I'm dating and it's cool, but he don't really see me, or oh, it is the highest experience you can have with love. If you're not experiencing that, there is some form of love blockage. Here are the
mm,
6 love blockages. We have trauma, and we always start with trauma because trauma is the biggest one. And on our communities, we don't tend to think things that are traumas because historically we push past it. We keep it moving. That's what we're trained to do. That's what we've watched other prior generations to do. And that's actually what's helped us to be resilient, but it's also what has kept us uh, birthing new love blockages. So, trauma, fear, we all have fears, but if those fears run us and they don't allow us to really step into what it is we truly want, whether it's connecting, whether it's releasing, whether it's letting someone go, blessing and releasing them because they're not good for me, whatever it is, we got fears. Next one is incompletions. We all have had experiences that we may have not settled. And if you're not settling something, let's say someone cheated on a person and they haven't done the deep dive and make peace with it and understand why it happened and just be accountable for the experience in general, that incompletion will carry into the next experience. So now we got trauma, fear, incompletions. A big one, false narratives. All of us walk around with things that are not true, but we think they're true because of our experience, like all men cheat, or there are no good men left, or all black
ooh,
women are too masculine, or all black men are
love.
bossy, or all of these narratives, or even down to I'm not worthy of the kind of love that I want. Too much has happened. I'm not going to
Mm,
get a quality woman or man because of what I've done or what experiences I've had. All of those show up.
mm,
And then we have things like external factors. So when we have external factors like people that are, telling us things about our culture, our society that's not true, but it's all over the place. So it must be true. Now, all black women want to live the soft life and they don't want to do nothing to be accountable. Or all men or whatever, or most men or whatever the case may be. And then finally, we have false agreements or agreements we make with ourselves. I will never do that again. I won't allow myself to do this again. We find our false agreements or our agreements that we use to protect ourselves, and they're meant to be boundaries, but then they become walls. And then I've met women and men, more women that have been like, oh, it's been like 5 years since I've been with somebody. It's been 10 years. I had a woman tell me it's been 10 years since she's been hugged. Just hugged.
Oh man.
10 years. Broke my heart. I almost cried because she had an
Mm.
agreement in her mind about not putting herself out there, not being vulnerable again. And then time just morphed into being comfortable with what doesn't work. And the fear kicked in of, I don't know what to do now. I don't know how to even get out there anymore. So all of these love blockages are at play. And a lot of times we have 2 to 3 at any given time showing up, running the scene, communicating when we're out dating, communicating our relationships, and we wonder why we're running in circles and having failed relationships, or not necessarily failed relationships, but relationships that are less than the quality we deserve.
Whoa.
Love
Whoa.
blockages.
Well, I think you probably just articulated 99.9% of those who are in the dating market's
Yes,
challenges
yes,
with those blockages.
yes.
And look, how does somebody, let me how do I phrase this? So you have the things that you can be conscious of, right? But then you add on the layer of us being Black professionals, and we've got a historic connection to traumatic experiences that are wrapped up in our genes.
Yeah.
So, how do you work through some of those deep things? And I get the social engineered stuff, right? The narratives that are implanted about Black women or Black men that we then take on as whatever. But the things that we're bringing to it through whether it's our childhood, which I love that you brought that up, through environment, through experiences, where does somebody start to unblocking these blockages?
So I'll tell you what I did. Can I tell you a quick story that forced me
Please.
to do it that was very powerful and very telling? So I'll tell the short version. When I was a child, I was estranged from my father. And so one particular day, I felt this strong need to see him. I begged my mother, begged her, take me over there. I really want to see my dad. I need to see my dad. She says no, probably about 10 times, maybe not quite 10, but she said no a lot of times. Long story short, she finally says yes. We get on his street, and I said, Mom, he's either moved or he's dead because he's not here. I was a very intuitive child. True story. There's a lady sitting on the in the porch, and back in 227, I don't know if you're old enough to remember
Oh,
227,
I'm
but
old
I'm
enough
dating
to remember.
myself.
Come on. Jack K, let's go. Yeah.
Okay, and remember
Uh-huh.
when the older woman sat in the stoop and she
Mm-hmm.
heard everything that was going on. I can't remember her name. Rose, I
Yeah.
think it was, or
That
something.
was my grandmother on our block, by the way. Not
Right?
sweeping for no reason. The
For no
sidewalk was
reason.
clean as hell, but she just hearing the
But she
tea
was
up the
just
street.
sweeping, paying attention, getting the tea.
Yeah.
Well, this lady was her. She was getting the tea. She happened to overhear. She said,
Mm.
Are y'all going to so and so's house? And we said, Yeah. She said, Oh, he's not there anymore. He's in the hospital and he's not expected to make it. And all the family's been contact. But of course, my mom wasn't married to him. We're estranged.
Mm.
Unfortunately, my father had his own challenges with being an alcoholic and so forth. So we get to the hospital exactly 1 hour before we get there. He had passed, but he was still in the bed. So the first time I ever see a dead body, I'm 12. I'm trying to get to my father. I couldn't get to him. So you know what happens as a result of that? I grew up trying to save Black men. Why? Because the 12-year-old couldn't get and save her father. Now she's going to try to save Black men. And all of the men that I seriously settled down with until I changed this agreement were Black men that had chronic health conditions. I'd skip up through all the other men, but the ones that I would settle down with and
Oh
take
wow.
serious were the
Yeah.
ones that had chronic life, almost near death health conditions. because my little girl made an agreement that she couldn't save her father. She's going to save other men. She's going to save Black men. And it wasn't until I went to therapy, got a divorce, and asked myself, which is the question, the answer to your question, how do we start? Like, what do we do? We have to be willing to have the vulnerable, intimate conversations with ourselves, which I like to tell my clients shadow work. We have to be willing to ask the hard, painful, challenging question that seems a little odd. Like why would you settle down with all of these men? You passed up great men, but you settled down to be with men that were damn near on death's bed in different moments of their life. And why did you do that, Renee? And then I realized because my little girl was still the one picking. She was the one making the decisions because she was the one that never reconciled to lose her father that she's trying to get to. So those are the kinds of things that we need to be willing to ask ourselves. Like, why do I do what I do? Or what's the thing that I don't want to be honest with myself about? Or what's the truth that hurts so much that I'd rather ignore it and keep doing the same habit over and over again? Or what's the thing that I lie about that is just too hard to face and I'd rather just act like it's not there? Like, I had to ask myself the hard question. Why would I let certain men treat me the way that they did? Why would I put myself in situations that harm me? What does that say about myself? Because, see, I was a serial dater. So I would go on 2, 3 dates a day. That was my norm. I had
Come
no
on
problem
now.
getting dates. So I would go on 2, 3 dates. But here's the thing,
Uh-huh.
most of them were people that didn't treat me well. Most of them were people that didn't see me, but I kept doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing. And then I like to tell clients, be open to do it with a trained professional, whether it's a therapist or a love coach, be willing to do it with someone. Because if you keep hitting the wall, like hitting the wall, at some point, you want to do something different. And a lot of us, we're over 40 when we realize we need to do something different. We're a divorce later, where all kind of trauma stored later. We're all kind of now fears because now we're afraid to get back out there. We don't trust because we've allowed a lot of space for more and more hurt to happen. And we are walking around as a group of people hurting each other. And I like to say this, we have to learn that we're so much more connected than we think. If
Mm.
we understood that, even in our walk with healing ourselves, we would be more gentle with approaching other people a certain way, which actually helps towards our healing because it doesn't give another person permission to do more harm. Somebody has to interrupt the pattern.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I mean, the brokenness in you was attracting the brokenness of others. I don't think a lot of people really recognize that, right? When you look around, you're like, why do I keep dealing with the same experiences? And you can't trace that back to your own brokenness. And I get it. And you say it, the things that we lie to ourselves about that we don't want to face, right? Or it's too hard, or I feel like if I, right, I don't want to, open these wounds up, or whatever the case may be. Those are the things that keep people in those patterns and loops. And I love that you're helping your clients address that. One of the things in that commentary is that inner child, right? And so I have there's a post that's out or coming out shortly, but it was talking about inner child with grown consequences. And this right, this notion of and it was a story where
Wow.
like one of the kids flooded our second floor toilet and the water was coming down in our bedroom
Whew.
hallway. So stop the flow, fine, and then put buckets down in the bedroom and towels to soak up the water. Well, I don't know, an hour and a half goes by and I'm in the bed chilling, watching TV. And my wife walks in and these towels and the buckets are still there. And she's like, why didn't you clean this up? And my immediate response was like, oh, yeah, I was just waiting until the water collected and then I was going to get it all together. And it was like this immediate response that I was like, and she just gave me the side eye and walked out, right? So I knew I was in it. and and so like the next day, well, actually later that evening, as I reflected, I apologized. I was like, look, babe, I want to apologize because I didn't show up in that moment in my accountability for not doing what I knew I was supposed to do. And in fact, my response was that of my 9-year-old self that got caught and was in trouble and didn't want to, right.
Right.
And deflecting that, but
Didn't want to
I'm
face
aware.
it.
No. And you know, and I don't want to make her unhappy, right? And I'm a child of divorce, right? My parents were divorced when I was 5. So
Wow.
the happiness and keeping the parent happy and not doing anything to get them upset because
to rock the
right.
boat. Yeah.
So I've been doing that work, right? So I'm recognizing in that moment I showed up as my child. Yeah. As my inner child, and I apologize. And she understood, but I was like, you know what, these are things that you work through and you have, but it's the people who ignore it. And they're like, what's wrong with you? You know, I get it when I get it.
Right,
yeah,
right.
I could have been that guy, but no.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have
And
served.
you know, I think you're onto a powerful thing, John. I think you said something that made me just think about, here's the challenge with us now as Black professionals. The adult in us has achieved the cars, the degrees, the houses, the fabulous trips, and all the other surface level things that make the adult in us feel like we don't have to deal with the child in us, because our self identity is through the things we've accomplished. Like, I used to be her. I used to be like, I got the house and the luxury car and the 6-figure job, and that was the surface how I seen myself. So I didn't have to be accountable for being real because I had made it. I was successful. Meanwhile, all my relationships with men were horrible. And it's on both sides, it's men and women. We think that because we've gotten more of some things, that absolves us of being honest about our inability to have healthy relationships, first with ourselves and then with another.
That's it. I mean, that's the nail on the head. And it's such a great revelation too in this conversation, because as we're speaking to Black professionals who have been programmed, for lack of a better word, by our foreparents to go and succeed in education, then take that into our professional careers and excel and climb and climb, right? That push.
Yes.
But nobody ever taught us how to love ourselves, how to rest, how to feel, how to be accountable, how to build relationships in a healthy and sustainable way. None of that was in the curriculum.
Yeah. No.
And unfortunately,
keep going.
They keep going. And then they get to this point of success, whether it's men or women, and they're looking around and like, I've achieved all these external markers of success, but internally I'm lonely. I'm depressed, right? I don't feel like I can enjoy any of these things. I'm doing all these things that look great on social, but I'm alone at night, right? So these are the things that we're trying to work through to help reprogram, right? Like, what is these internal markers of success rather than the external? And I'm going through that journey myself, like being a product of 2 parents who are corporate and entrepreneurial. And I've got the house, I've got the cars, I've lived and done, but I'm like, for who? For what?
Yeah.
Right? At what cost?
At what cost? That part. I think it's a beautiful thing that someone asked me one time on a panel discussion, they said, what do you think our ancestors would say to us now when they looked at us? And I'll never forget my response. I said, in some ways, they would be proud, because they would be like, in our wildest dreams, we never thought y'all would accomplish the things y'all accomplished. And then I said, and in another breath of the same coin, different side, they would be devastated that we have gotten so far away from each other. We've gotten so far away from integral energy with each other that we've gotten so far away from our spiritual attunement. And I'm not talking about religion, I'm talking about
Mm.
spiritual attunement with life and with
Mhm.
ourselves, and that they would be mortified in some ways. And so it's a hard conversation, because yes, we want to achieve, we want to be better, we want to have things that our ancestors didn't have, but it cannot be at the expense of ourselves, our relationships, our family, our community. It cannot be where ego runs the show more than love.
Ooh,
It just
ooh,
cannot
that's a
be.
bar. That's a bar. Yes, ego cannot run the show. That's the t-shirt, ladies and gentlemen, right there.
That's a t-shirt.
And that's hard because you're almost trained to run off of pride, right? Off
Yeah.
of knowing your value or your worth in a professional sense, because you're having to fight to get in the rooms you're in, right? Sisters have to be, successful in male dominated spaces.
Yeah.
Brothers have to be successful in spaces where they're still viewed as threat. So how do you turn that off for the love life? And these are the conversations, right? So um, I
Yeah.
want to also bring up this notion of, where do we get advice, right? So right now on in the prevailing narratives on social are, I call them the trauma wars. Some people call them the gender wars, but I'm like, no, this is just two traumas arguing.
Yeah.
But the thing that I'm seeing a lack of is not only high quality, but just good quality content from people who are on a healing journey, giving advice, and even people who are successfully in relationships, giving advice. I'm seeing a lot of viewership and followership for people who aren't in relationships, giving relationship advice.
Creating love blockages.
Talk to me about
Reinforcing.
that. What are you seeing out there? What do you see?
I'm seeing a lot of the same things. Now, I will say this, I do see some positive messages, because I look for that in my algorithm. So, like, there are, of course, I'm going to plug the Love Camp. We have a private community that we
Mm-hmm.
support, and we do videos to share with people. But I do things like the Black Revolution. I see them,
Mm-hmm.
Black Couples Revolution. I think that's the name of them. I see groups like that, but there are more than not toxic groups or toxic messages, I should say. And I think a lot of it is because I agree that times have changed from our ancestors, in terms of now there's two households working, two people in the households, or women are a lot more independent than they used to be, or um, there's different messages that we need to acknowledge that has happened over time. So I acknowledge that. I don't want to be naive and say that change hasn't happened. The challenge I have with it is that the more changes happen, the more we're reinforcing divisiveness and being at odds with each other, more than I've ever seen. And and it has been around. I remember some of the authors that I've read about that were talking about, in the 90s, the divisiveness between us. So this is not a new conversation, but I feel like the more successful we become, the more we get further away from each other. And then to add to it, I've heard Black men say they feel that Black women are in competition with them. And statistically, some of that is true now. We're competing for the same jobs. I used to manage a brother that I was friends with prior. And then once I started managing him, there was this divisiveness. And I had to say to him, listen, I'm not your enemy. I'm doing my job, but I'm here for you. And he thanked me later and said, wow, I needed your approach, the way you showed up, to get me to see some things. But these are the kinds of things we keep running into. And unless, again, like, case in point, and I'm going to say this, you know how many men have said to me the way I rejected them was so honorable that they never experienced that? Something as simple as our culture, like telling a brother or a woman, you're not for me, but doing it with class. So that that person isn't walking around now feeling like they've been rejected and
Yeah.
dejected and all of these bad things, that now they got to do it to somebody else. You know how many men have said to me, wow, you were classy with it. I didn't feel emasculated. I didn't feel like you didn't wish me well, even though you're not for me. I've had men call me and say that to me. And it's
Oh,
just because
wow.
I pride myself on how we're connected. We are our brothers and sisters keepers more than we realize. And just because you're not for me romantically does not mean that I don't wish you well and that I don't see you. We
Mm.
don't see each other anymore. And that's the problem.
So, I got to ask, and I'm sure the audience wants to hear, especially the sisters, what is an example of a classy rejection?
I love it. I appreciate you. I'm used to doing online and in person. I appreciate that you're interested in me. I don't see that we align on the same things, or right now is not something that I would like to do with you, but I really appreciate you approaching me, and I wish you all the best for the person that's right for you.
There it is, y'all. Take notes. Take notes. This is a good one because I find that there's conversations, and it's interesting across the gender perspective about how to approach somebody that you have an interest in, right? So it could be you're in a setting, and we've done some of these conversations where it's like, hey, you're in a cafe,
Mhm.
and you're sitting there enjoying your coffee of choice or your beverage of choice, and a fine sister walks in or a fine brother walks in, and you're like, huh. Now the question is, how do you make it known that you have interest in a way that doesn't leave you looking thirsty and or too aggressive, right? So I'll leave it there, but I would love if you can give some perspective on that. How to approach somebody you have an interest in.
So me and my love talk about this all the time. So
Yeah.
I'm a borrow a little bit from him and a little bit from myself. So first of all, you have to be confident. And we do know that rejection is hard no matter how confident you are. So we have to be mindful of that. If it's a man, a lot of times, and a woman's going up to a man, sometimes you could simply compliment them and read their energy. That's a really nice watch. Or I like how you're wearing that suit. And pause. If they're interested, they will respond in kind, like in some way. I see you, sister, or some compliment. If they're not interested, a lot of the men will either brush you off or they'll say thank you and keep it moving. But at least you have a sense, are they open? But you got to read the body language. So at that point, you complimented him. No harm, no foul. He don't know necessarily. You didn't look thirsty. You just let him know I see you. For men, if they're complimenting a woman, this is what I learned from Chad, my love. He said you can go up to a woman and just like, let's say it's a regular place, a restaurant. You can go up to her and say, and I'm okay with this. Like, have you eaten here before? What do you like? What's on the menu that you like? It's striking up a conversation. It's not I'm trying to get with you. It's checking the temperature. If she's warm enough, body language or her energy says something about you I'm interested in, that conversation will open the door before you just outright say, can I have your number? It's about creating that connection first to see, is there a little bit of chemistry or interest here so that I'm not walking away being too intense and too aggressive. So I think those two work really well.
These are strong. These are strong. And I would love to hear in the comments from brothers and sisters who leverage these in real time. Come back and let us know how it went.
Yeah, let us know.
um, I I wanna move us into marriage.
Mm,
And this is an interesting one. I posted something. In fact, earlier this year, Dr. George C. Frazier was uh, on the stage with Black Enterprise, and it was a fireside chat, and he went viral for this clip about um, Black family being the existential crisis in the Black community right now. And it resonated because he dropped stat after stat after stat, and it is sobering.
it's
Um,
alarming, yeah.
and so when I posted this clip on LinkedIn, with very large Black professional network, the range of vitriol, I got cooked in certain in no uncertain terms, mainly because the premise was, echoing that Black marriage is at an all-time low, which is a fact, abject fact, that we are the least married racial group in the United States today, between
Quickest
1978
divorce.
and to today, right?
Mhm.
But from Reconstruction to 1978, 1866 to 1978, we were the most married racial group in the country at over 85%. Now we're down to 29, 30%. Point being, the commentary that I saw a lot of, and I'll be honest, it was coming from sisters, that marriage isn't something to be viewed and upheld from the past, right? In the sense of what's attached to that. Well, our great grandmoms didn't have a choice, or a tantamount to slavery, if you will, being in marriage. And I'm just like, where did these narratives come from? And I'm not naive, to your earlier point, to ignore that there were some bad marriages. That is not unique to us as people.
Right.
But I started to see, and I've started to hear that this narrative of our foreparents' relationships and marriages were less consensual, less mutual, less equal, or in some cases, I've heard they were just horrible. Right?
Me too.
That women were subjected to abuse and cheating, and husbands having families across town. And I'm like, okay, yes, those things happen, but why do we suggest that that was the dominant narrative? So where I'm going with this is, how do we get marriage back into a light that is a positive, right? A standard for not only our survival but our success, versus this narrative of, it's an unequal proposition.
I like what you said, a narrative for our survival and success. That's a t-shirt. That that's a seriously, that is a t-shirt, because that is exactly what we're dealing with. We're at a critical time, and it concerns me that so many of us don't see it. Like, what are you looking at? What is happening? Blows my mind, and we still have buffoonery in these debates and devices.
Listen,
I don't even think we can afford to in this season. But
that's
that's
right.
my little rant to answer your question.
We're here for the rants. We are
Right?
here for the rants.
Listen, because
Let's
I got some
go.
rants. I think we normalize, make marriage more of the standard than the exception by a few things. Address the things that really people are concerned about that make marriage less attractive. We can't just promote marriage if people aren't hearing that those of us that are in the space of leading the charge of promoting it hear them, because there are some valid points of what you're saying. I talk to a lot of women and men, and they say, what is in it for them? A lot of people don't feel like marriage is something that is worthwhile, whether it's an economic situation. Women feel like it's just servitude. Like, it's just all these different things that we need to address. That's the first thing. Let's be honest about what it is and what it's not and what it could be. But then, more important, we need to give the skills. This is why the Love Camp is so passionate about what we do, because it's one thing to talk about a thing, but if you don't know how to create it, if you don't know how to make marriage or any relationship one that's healthy, that's fulfilling, that's enjoyable, that's safe, then why would you want to go and do it? Like, I'm not signing
Listen.
up for something that feels like it's not a beautiful experience. It may take some work, but it still has to be something that is valuable to me. And we
Mm-hmm.
don't see marriage as valuable because we don't have the skills to create it as
Mm.
valuable. Whether it's communication, we don't know how to communicate well. We don't trust like we need to. We don't know how to fully hold space for respect and kindness and see each other. All the things that some of the things that were evident in our great grandparents. There were some of those things there, but
Mm-hmm.
it was simpler in many ways. It was hard because of the society in which we were in, but it was simpler because we didn't have all these external social media and all. We knew what time it was. It's us. Ain't nobody helping us. It's us. So we're going to figure it out. And I think we've stopped learning that marriage is a tool to work and figure it out. We've made marriage an easy scapegoat that we don't have to work towards. People get divorced so easily now. And I feel like we have to learn how to pick better too, so that we're not in a marriage that we want to get out of and then keep supporting a high divorce rate. But then I think the third thing is we have to do what you're doing and what the Love Camp is doing, and that's help be a support for healing. Because if you're getting married or you're not thinking about marriage in this option, it's because you got your own context about it. And I get it, marriage might not be for everybody, but a lot of people's decisions to not even be interested in marriage is because they have their own love blockages they haven't resolved. They haven't figured out how to heal those things. And it's easier just to walk away than to be honest about doing the work.
Mm.
And until we deal in those three lanes, marriage will not look attractive to anybody because we're getting further and further away from it. And then finally, bonus, we live in a society that, a lot of times in our culture, especially in the entertainment world, that it just obliterates healthy relationships. Like, gosh, like stuff we see.
Listen.
And we're so immune to it almost.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We come to be skeptical of healthy relationships. Like, why they look so happy? Something's wrong. Let me go find something wrong with that.
Behind closed doors, it looks different. That's what they say.
You know who ruined that for everybody? Will and Jada. Will and Jada, y'all ruined that because y'all were goals. Bill Cosby. Man, listen, anyway.
Yeah, there was some folks. Different story.
But look, that's one of the key things is we don't have visual examples of successful, healthy, and long-term relationships in a media universe, right? There's what we had before, and it was funny. We back in the Clubhouse days, in the pandemic, I had a room called Plantation Theory, which was the name of the book, the name of my book, actually, Plantation Theory, The Black Professional Struggle Between Freedom and Security. The room for Clubhouse was for Black professionals to come and talk about the things that we couldn't talk about at work. One of the questions was around the concept of not necessarily it wasn't marriage related. Oh, now I just left my head that quick. I'll edit that out. The point being, and you were just talking about the notions of marriage. Oh, media portrayal. We didn't have. I was asking, can anybody name a show on television, present or past, that depicted a happily married, stay-at-home Black wife?
I feel like that's a Jeopardy question.
It should be, right? I'll take There Wasn't One for 1,000 years.
Exactly.
Yeah, think about that. Even growing up, can you remember a show with a happily married, stay-at-home wife that was Black?
No. How did you say that?
Yeah, and as you're thinking that hard, let me ask you, can you name one for a white show?
Several.
Immediately.
I Dream of Jeannie and all these other,
Leave It to Beaver.
And
Knows Best.
Yep.
And so
but all of ours were struggling.
And that is powerful because media and entertainment is one of the most powerful psychological programmers. That's why they call it television programming that you can have. So if we don't even grow up seeing visuals of it, and then even if you grew up in a 2-parent household, I find, and I talk to folks, who grew up in, they saw they saw their parents. And so when they get into the market, they like, I want that. But you don't know the mechanics of their marriage and how they sustained it, right?
Right.
So this is why on Upfront, the mentorship community is critical. We have married couples 7 years or more who are giving game to aspiring spouses to demystify what it actually takes. Because
Right.
who's taught us how to be a husband? Who's taught us how to be a wife? Where do
Yeah.
we see it, and then how do we decode it
Yeah.
in a way that transfer of information was fluid from generation to generation? And that stopped
Yeah.
around the 60s. That was the
That's powerful. Yeah,
right.
that infiltration was real.
Listen,
It was
they knew what it
real.
was. If I
Hmm.
can break up the family, and then you go back, right? So you trace the roots back and you go and you say, well, what was the first thing that they did when they colonized? They
They went for
separated
the family.
they separated the family.
Yeah.
They divided the men from the women first.
Yep. Yep.
So these things are not new tactics. What we are still falling victim to, even on the other side of access,
Hmm.
is embodying their visuals of success, which is monetary and resource acquisition and accumulation, devoid of the humanity that we've been robbed of for over 5 centuries.
Yeah. And you know what's fascinating to me? Because what you
Hmm.
said is like, it's like a mic drop, and yet we still don't realize that we're in the same struggle. Somehow we're in the same struggle and we're fighting each other. What?
What? Make it
What?
make
Make
sense.
it make sense. Like, okay, so really quickly,
Yeah, please.
I I facilitated a talk for 50 Black men that were healing. Shout out to this nonprofit. It's Black Men Healing out of Philly.
Yeah.
And there were 50, almost 50 men in there talking about their most vulnerable and painful experiences around everything from relationships to how they were impacted from their mother and so forth. And you know what I saw? We have the same pain. Like when I was listening to the men and how they were feeling, like they weren't
Mhm.
loved and they weren't supported and they don't know how to trust their mom and their father. And it's the same story. I talk to women and they say the same thing. And yet, instead of being compassionate, empathetic on both sides, it's easier for us to attack. It's easier for us to point the finger and make men wrong or women wrong than
Yeah.
to own that we're in the same fight.
Mm,
And to be
mm.
allies is to be able to survive in this season. And we don't get it.
And imagine if we did. Oh, we'd be competitive as a people. Oh, and they know it. And they know it. And that's why the algorithm feeds the disconnect and divide.
Foolishness. Yeah.
So, look, I want to be respectful of your time because, gosh, we could talk for hours. I want to number one, I want everybody to know about Love Camp, and I want you to plug gratuitously um, where people can find you, how they can become clients,
Yeah.
and start this journey uh, of love with you in Love Camp.
So definitely they can reach us at thelovecamp.co. So that's www.thelovecamp.co, not .com.
We'll have the link in the description for sure.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then also, because I'm so passionate about helping with supporting the love blockages, I'm also going to give you a link for a love blockage bundle that I did that was phenomenal just to help people deal with these 6 love blockages because they are real, and until you deal with them it's going to be hard to connect. And then they
Mhm.
can find us on Instagram, and then they can also reach out to us at info@thelovecamp.co.
I love it. Yes, these are content rich resources that aren't just good reading; they're good when you apply them too. So we will make sure that our that anybody who comes across this episode has all of this work, and we can't wait to feature it. Anything you want to share, imparting before we
Yeah.
go?
Well, one, I want to say thank you for having me. I love this conversation. You're right. I could talk about this for 10 hours, and the the stimuli that you bring to the conversation is so powerful and so necessary. So thank you.
Received. Thank you.
Yeah, really good information and good content. Um, I think the thing I would say in closing is that I would invite us to remember that at our core, we are feeling and experiencing a lot of the same things in the same reality, and we think it's different. And I would invite people to take the blinders off of what we are seeing as common everyday truth and just be open to a different truth that will connect us and help us to see each other better. Like,
Mm,
I'm inviting us to change the narrative that they have by being open to seeing something different. Because if you see the same thing over and over and you're convinced yourself that's the truth, that will always be what has to show up because that's your truth. But if you give yourself permission to think that, wait a minute, there's something going on and this could look different. We could be better. I could have love. We could be stronger. We could be more connected. We could be healthier together. Let me just be open to that. And then watch what shows up then. So I'm challenging your
beautiful.
audience to be open.
Mm, easier said than done, y'all, but this is the work. Renee Miller, the Love Camp. Thank you. We are so
Welcome.
grateful to have had you on and would love to have you back, obviously.
Woo, woo.
Um, and certainly we will stay in tune and make sure that our audience becomes your audience. So thank you again
And vice
for
versa.
those. Absolutely. So those watching, if you are not already signed up for the early access to Upfront, head on over to upfront.love, and those links will be down there as well. And we look forward to bringing you more of these conversations and content. So thank y'all. Peace, be well. Stay healthy, love yourself, and drink some water, damn it. Heart of the beholder. Love is in the heart of the beholder. It's in the heart of the beholder. Love is in the heart of the beholder.